The studio buzzed with anticipation the night Jamie Foxx was set to appear on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, a multi-talented powerhouse returning to the spotlight after a brief hiatus due to health concerns. And as the band struck up its opening notes and Colbert delivered his monologue with the usual balance of satire and wit, the crowd roared when Jamie stepped onto the stage, flashing his legendary smile and exuding the charisma that had long made him a beloved figure in both music and film. And the first few moments of the interview unfolded smoothly, with jokes about aging, reflections on early fame, and stories from the sets of his latest projects. But soon the tone shifted when Colbert brought up the increasingly blurred line between celebrity activism and misinformation, referencing a recent video Jamie had shared on social media that, according to Colbert, raised some eyebrows for invoking conspiracy rhetoric. And Jamie, visibly caught off guard by the pivot, shifted in his seat and tried to reframe the conversation by saying, "Look, man, I've been through a lot, physically and spiritually. And sometimes you speak from experience before you speak from polish." But Colbert, not satisfied with that response, pressed harder, quoting fact-checkers and media outlets who had criticized the video and asking Jamie directly if he believed he was helping or hurting public discourse. And Jamie's smile faded. His voice steadied, and he said, "It's real easy to sit behind that desk and tell me what I should or shouldn't say about my own journey," which earned murmurs from the audience, and Stephen, sensing the tension, tried to pivot with humor, joking that he was just asking the questions the internet was already screaming. But Jamie didn't laugh. Instead, he leaned forward and said, "When I was lying in that hospital bed, not knowing if I was going to walk again, I didn't have journalists fact-checking my reality. I had to figure it out, minute by minute," and the room chilled, the clapping halted. And Colbert's usual composure cracked just slightly as he responded, "I understand pain, Jamie. But with great influence comes great responsibility," which only provoked Jamie further, who countered, "Responsibility starts with being heard, not being corrected every time your truth doesn't match the script." And from there, the exchange unraveled with both men holding their ground, one defending his platform and the other his pain. And eventually, Jamie reached a tipping point when Colbert interrupted him mid-sentence to clarify a statistic, prompting Jamie to remove his mic, glance toward the audience, and say, "You invited Jamie Foxx, not a politician, not a preacher, Jamie Foxx. If that's too real for y'all, I'll see myself out." And with that, he stood, wave two, the stunned crowd, and walked off stage as the house band stumbled to fill the silence with awkward music. And Stephen Colbert, left staring at the empty chair, tried to save face with a joke about not every night ending with a mic drop, but the damage was done, and by the next morning, the footage had gone viral, with clips dissected on every news site and social platform, sparking heated debates about cancel culture, free speech, and how much space black men were allowed to occupy in media without being filtered or framed. And Jamie, meanwhile, stayed quiet for the next 48 hours, during which countless celebrities from across the industry weighed in some praising his courage to walk away from a disrespectful moment, others suggesting he had let ego override responsibility. But the turning point came when Jamie released a self-filmed message, seated in his backyard, calm and direct, where he said, "I didn't walk off because I was mad. I walked off because I was done explaining my humanity to a system that still don't get it." And that line, clipped and shared widely, sparked a wave of support that dwarfed the criticism, with fans, activists, and even comedians applauding his refusal to play the role expected of him. And while Stephen addressed the event with a more somber tone on his next show, acknowledging that sometimes conversations get too real for late night, the impact lingered far beyond that week's ratings, with major outlets running think pieces titled, "When Keeping It Real Isn't Welcome on TV," and Jamie Foxx in the performance of respectability in media. And in the following months, Jamie leaned into his own narrative, launching a YouTube docuseries on healing, trauma, and truth-telling in black communities, where he featured not celebrities but everyday people whose stories mirrored his own, creating space that didn't rely on validation from the traditional gatekeepers. And the success of the series led to awards, partnerships, and invitations to speak at universities about the future of honest storytelling, And though his walk-off had started as a flashpoint, it ended as a catalyst, reshaping how he was perceived, not just as an entertainer, but as an unfiltered voice in a filtered world. And in interviews months later, when asked if he'd ever return to late-night TV, Jamie would smile, pause, and say, "Only if I get to. Bring my whole self, not just the parts they're comfortable clapping for." In the weeks that followed Jamie Foxx's dramatic walk-off from The Late Show, a shift began to ripple through the entertainment industry, one that couldn't be packaged neatly into a headline or reduced to a meme. Because what happened that night wasn't just a celebrity clash. It was a mirror held up to a media structure built on controlling tone, shaping narratives, and expecting gratitude from guests who have survived battles far deeper than what a talk show segment allows. And while Stephen Colbert attempted to return to normalcy, opening the next episode with a carefully worded monologue about the challenges of live conversation, it rang hollow to many who had watched the clip and seen the way Jamie had been cornered, and audiences noticed ratings dipped slightly, viewership online skewed heavily toward Jamie's favor, and among black creators and entertainers, a wave of commentary emerged, not angry, but thoughtful, honest, grounded in the tension that's been brewing for decades between authenticity and accessibility. Because while Jamie Foxx had walked off a stage, what he really walked away from was the expectation that black entertainers must stay charming, funny, and agreeable even when being undermined. And that idea landed hard with fans, scholars, and even other celebrities who began sharing their own moments of discomfort on media platforms, how they'd been cut off, redirected, or subtly condescended to when speaking about trauma or justice or anything that complicated their entertainment value. And Jamie, while not fanning the flames, didn't retreat either. Instead, he showed up quietly but powerfully, appearing on independent podcasts, speaking at community events, lending his platform to rising voices. And each time, his presence was calmer, deeper, no longer chasing laughs, but holding space for truth. And soon after, he released a single, not a typical radio banger, but a stripped-down, piano-led track called Exit Stage Left that sampled his own voice from the Colbert interview. The lyric, "I'll see myself out," woven between verses about dignity, legacy, and the cost of always having to perform for acceptance. And it wasn't just a song, it was a statement, climbing charts and becoming a cultural artifact of that pivotal moment, while Colbert, now increasingly aware of the weight his questions carry, adjusted his interview style subtly, becoming more careful with language, more cautious around hot topics. And some critics praised this evolution while others questioned whether it came too late. And through it all, Jamie didn't apologize, didn't clarify, didn't offer the usual reconciliation arc that TV producers dream of. He simply moved forward, and in doing so, he set a new tone not only for how celebrities demand to be treated on media platforms, but for how truth is told in spaces designed more for entertainment than confrontation. And that's when the real shift began. Networks started reaching out to Jamie, not just for interviews, but to consult on new programming, to help develop a late-night alternative that centered real conversations, free from overproduction and pre-cleared questions. And while many expected him to reject the offer outright, Jamie instead surprised everyone by agreeing, but on one condition: full creative control, no edits without approval, and the right to walk away again at any time. And when the deal was signed and the pilot announced, titled Uncut with Jamie Foxx, the buzz was immediate. Because people weren't just interested in the show, they were invested in the statement behind it. The idea that maybe late night could evolve past safe laughter and curated moments into something that actually meant something. And when the show finally premiered, it did so with no live audience, just Jamie and his guests in a dark, intimate setting, talking openly, laughing deeply, pausing when needed. And it worked. Viewers called it real, raw, what late night should be. In the first episode, featuring a powerful conversation with Viola Davis about ownership and emotional labor, drew record-breaking streams, while Colbert, Letterman, Fallon, and others began facing new questions about format, freedom, and whether the old model could truly hold space.